Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this Sean and Sax Show. I think that's what it's called. I almost forgot there.
It'll stick one of these days.
If you guys could see behind the scenes, I think you would really enjoy it. We just have quite the eventful life, quite the eventful reality. You said something before we started that was really funny. What did you say?
I always say
Apparently
funny
it wasn't
things.
that funny that I forgot it.
I don't remember what I said.
Anyways, guys, welcome to the show. We're going to dive right in. Let's just dive in. Should we just jump in? Let's jump in. We get amazing messages from people every single day. Real talk, like just dozens and dozens and dozens of messages between Sax and I.
Yes.
Of your guys' appreciation for the show and topics to talk about and all this other stuff. We really appreciate it. But as we were talking about the show today, there's one message that continues to come probably more than anything else. Would you say,
Yep.
dear?
Yes,
I mean, you would think people would be like, let's talk about sex, let's talk about this, let's talk about that, or whatever. But the message that comes more than anything else, and the question that comes more than anything else, is around the conversation of space, around creating space, and what does that mean? Now, we've talked about that in previous episodes. Yeah, and we're not talking about like where the aliens are at, or the stars, or the spaceships, or Elon Musk's Tesla, or anything like that. We're talking about like the literal experience of creating space, and you've probably heard this before from books or us or somebody else, but this idea, this reality of creating space.
Holding space.
Holding space. And we get messaged more on that, like what does it really mean? How does it work? Like what does that really look like? And we decided to kind of dive in on that today because it is an incredibly powerful reality, something that I did not truly understand until pretty recently, like within the last couple of years of my life, and something that Saxony and I talk about frequently. We've mentioned it probably damn near every episode, because it's such a huge part of our life. But what's interesting is how many people have asked, like, what does this mean to hold space? Like, what does it look like? And so as we were discussing the podcast today and how we wanted to address it, we identified basically 3 areas that we want to talk about today in holding space, creating space, which is personally, like with ourselves, with our significant other, lover, husband, wife.
Or anybody close in conflict.
Right, or anybody, really. Mom, dad, family, we'll just call it, our intimate family. And then kids. Around parenting.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Space and parenting.
And so really understanding this notion of holding space. It's something that was, I think you could maybe throw different titles on it or different ideas, but this reality of holding space is something that is, in my opinion, incredibly difficult to do if you're not able to do it with yourself. It's incredibly difficult to do it with anybody else, is what I'm saying, with a husband or a wife, if you're not able to do it with yourself. So, Sax, you were talking earlier about, what this looks like for yourself. Like, explain to everybody what your idea is and what your reality is around, like, holding space and or creating space, because they're kind of one and the same, if you will, for yourself.
Right. So, when you start to get really serious or aware of your triggers, your traumas, when you fly off the handle and why you're doing that, there's this time that I've come to recognize between the thing that ignites the response and the response itself. And that is where I'm trying to really catch it before I go into full response mode. But say I do. Say I go and I get triggered and I'm in a really, really, really crappy mindset. The whole idea with holding space with myself is to know that, okay, I've gone here. This is not good for me. I'm in this space. So instead of punishing myself further or hating on myself, which it comes so easy. We start shaming ourselves, and then we fall into this victim mode or victimizer road. And so what happens is that holding space is kind of taking a step back and saying, okay, there's something to explore here, and proceeding with grace and just giving space to almost let the dust settle a little bit, and then where you can go in and dive in and figure out what that means instead of reacting or trying to pin it on something or pin it on another person or pin it on your past. Or it's just like just sitting in this space of like nothing. It's literally just being present with all of your feelings and letting yourself feel your own feelings without judgment.
Well, it's not nothing. It's something. Like, I mean, we could go down the Alan Watts rabbit hole if we'd like to about nothingness, but it's not nothing. It's not, I agree with what you're saying, and it's a great explanation, a great definition. Like, but I want people to be aware of realizing that there's not nothing there. There's something there, right? There's an emotion there. It's still there. There's a feeling there that's still there. And we could just, I mean, using an example of somebody saying something to you and it totally triggers you. It reminds you of something and it sends you down this rabbit hole. Whatever that rabbit hole is really, it's true, right? I think a lot of people think that somehow we shouldn't be emotional. We shouldn't have these reactions to certain things. We shouldn't have all these things. And I disagree wholly. I feel like the more emotions you have, like the better, the more in touch you are with your feelings and your intellect and your passion. But having yourself, just like when you get a text message, right? We always hear about like, wait to respond. If you're triggered or if you're pissed off, don't say shit when you're pissed off. Like take a step back, right? All of these different things with yourself. It's like knowing that for me, as an example, I want to burn shit down. I get triggered, I get pissed off. And I initially, most of the time, think of these grandiose things, right? Like I make something that could be really, really small and I turn it into something fucking huge, which it's not really true. It's not really there, right? That's just my mind. And so for me, that space is saying, okay, yeah, I'm pissed off right now, or I'm sad right now, or I'm upset right now, and I'm not going to make any irrational decisions. I'm going to literally give myself, you say grace all the time, and it was really weird when we first started dating, you said grace all the time, and I was like, I didn't really get that word, and the more you say it, I get it now. I get it probably deeper than I did before, and the space obviously rhymes with grace. It's kind of the same thing. It's giving yourself grace. It's saying, yeah, I'm fucking pissed right now, and not wrapping judgment around it, not wrapping good or bad or right or wrong to it. It's this is where I'm at. This is what's going on, and for me, I realize that I have shitty days. I have shitty hours, shitty moments, shitty minutes, and giving myself the space to have those experiences without instantly jumping into a negative, without instantly jumping into a, this is wrong, this is bad, you should be on, you can't be mad, you can't be sad, any of these other things. So for me, like this idea of creating space or holding space, it's holding it for myself. Yeah. And this might sound really airy-fairy, wooey-booey, fucking hippy-dippy to some people, but it's really fucking powerful when you start understanding this. And you can call it whatever you want. We decided to talk about space because this is the commonality that people keep asking us about, is this holding space. But I think what's really dope about it is when you become self-aware and you acknowledge that you have emotions. I think this is kind of step number one for people, is saying, look, I'm emotional. This is not bad. This is not wrong. It's okay to have these feelings. It's okay to be up, to be down. It's okay to have dark days. It's okay to have light days. It's kind of the first step is acknowledging that's fine. It's not good. It's not bad. It's not right or wrong. It's just who we are as human beings. Then moving past that and giving yourself space, holding space when you go into something that you might not want to be into, when you experience something or you feel something that you might not want to necessarily feel but are feeling. It's like you said it really good, like pushing away, almost creating a literal gap. Like just kind of close your eyes and imagine just a gap between where you are right now, this emotion, this feeling, this whatever it is, and then where you want to be is like there's this gap there. And giving yourself the space, holding that space to say, okay, this is not bad or wrong. This is where I am. And here's what's happening right now. Not shitting, like you say, shaming yourself, shitting all over yourself, whatever you want to call it. It takes a lot of fucking effort to do this.
It takes a lot of effort, and it's most of the time, when these happen, we're reverting back to a prior way of response, like say as we were a child. And that's another part of my personal frustration is I'll get into these spaces where I know that this is not necessarily a valid response for what the stimuli was right in front of me. And so that's my work to be done in that holding space. Right. I know that if this shows up, that is an invitation to see where I need to do some work instead of turning to a bottle of vodka or video games or food or sex or all these other ways that we numb out those uncomfortable spaces that are caught in between. And that's truly like the most fertile, rich ground for becoming greater in your life, is if you are brave enough to get curious in that space with yourself.
Well, and getting curious is also, it's where you grow. I never really looked at it that way really until you and I started dating and understanding like this grace thing is giving yourself grace to be where you really are. You know what I mean? And holding space for where you really are. We're such a label-rich culture. We have to put a label on anything. This is bad. This is wrong. This is good. This is, whatever.
Yeah.
Or, you're angry or you're this. No, I'm not angry, but I'm not an angry person, but I was angry, right? Mm-hmm. We all have these emotions. And something that I really want people listening to this to understand is like a lot of our surroundings, our culture, if you will, our mom, our dad, our religion, our religious culture, our education system is really trying to numb everybody down into just being this hollow, emotionless being. Mm-hmm. You hear all these things about anger. There's nothing wrong with being angry. Being angry is very much a state of emotion that builds shit, right? Like there's nothing wrong with that, but it's understanding that and acknowledging that, right? It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to have darkness. It's okay to have, any of these emotions. This is something, I don't want to skip ahead and talk about the kid aspect yet, but this is something that I'm extraordinarily passionate about with my children, is helping them understand, like, it's okay to be sad. It's okay to be pissed off. Like, give yourself some grace, hold some space, allow yourself to feel those things. Especially with Bryn, my oldest daughter, who's 18, she and I have these conversations a lot, and we talk about this, and she's like, yeah, I'm really, really sad today, or I have these feelings, or I have these thoughts. Yeah. And I'm not trying to correct her and say, well, these are bad or these are wrong. It's empowering her to become more and more cognizant of them, and then having the tools and the resources to work your way out of them. Right. So when you're in the rabbit hole, or when you are feeling dark, or you are here, it's saying, okay, I'm going to give myself the grace. I'm going to hold some space for myself right now to feel these things. I'm not going to make any irrational decisions. I'm not going to send any irrational text messages. I'm not going to quit my job or burn my house down. I'm going to hold some space for myself to feel this, and then use the tools that I have, whatever they are, to move out of this state into a different state. That was a really good explanation.
Yeah.
Babe.
Well, and it's our responsibility to be constructive with these negative emotions. Yeah. Like, I can't
learn from them, build something with them.
Like, when I'm triggered, I go down. If you've ever been to a therapist and they have you either go high or you go low. Right. I get sad, and that's my thing is. But the more I've gone into that space, this is where I've really found a significant amount of self-love, is going when I am in my sadness, is instead of punishing myself, which still I have slip-ups and it'll still happen because that's part of the processing. But what I do is I'll go down to that sad place, and instead of finding all these reasons to be more sad and to sit in that, I find a way to comfort and heal and show up where this whole emotion initially started, which was probably in your childhood. Because if you've ever researched Dr. Joe Dispenza, he talks about this, is most of these pathways in our brain happen between 1 and 7 years old. So to give yourself grace when you're in that space of knowing that now we get to reparent ourselves, it is now our responsibility of healing that and being aware of why, instead of going out and taking that fury out on the world around you and completely bypassing the work.
I dig it.
Yeah, baby.
Let's talk about relationships.
This one is big. I'm going to just start this with
go ahead, babe.
Before you and I dated, this was something, and this is truly why this was really important for us to do this show, is I remember dating someone, and I used to use the term holding space. I was like, will you just hold space? And I remember him saying, I don't even know what these words mean that you say. Like, I literally didn't, the vocabulary wasn't even on the wave, on their wavelength, and that's no fault of them. But I don't think that a lot of people have this vocabulary. So in your marriage, in your relationships, if you can sit down and say, hey, this is what holding space means to me. When we're say in conflict, this is what holding space would mean for me. This is what I could, and would be a great conversation to have on date night, not when you're in the middle of a conflict. So the other person has a roadmap to helping integrate holding space into your relationship and what that means, because it's a powerful tool.
Well, and that's why we're doing this podcast, is to share our reality, our experiences, because I feel like we're probably a lot more like other people than not. You know what I mean? We all have demons, we all have darkness, we all have past, and you and I have chosen to build some really cool things between us. We've also built some really cool things individually, and what we have works for us. And so, you know, that's the reason we're doing this podcast. Is not like this is the only way. This is just what works for us. This is what we do, and this is why I think we resonate with people. But in sharing this reality, like, I didn't really understand all of this to the extent that I do until we started to date, until we started to have these conversations. And I think this is why it's really important to understand this conversation specifically around space, especially for you single people who are dating, is there's probably no more important thing that you'll find or build in a relationship than somebody that understands this, right? Somebody that understands, like, it's not my responsibility to fix you, to make you whole. It's just 100 and 100 game, right? But if we're speaking the same language and understanding the same things, we have a lot more in common to build off of than if we don't, right? It's just, this is real common knowledge, but it's funny that we don't do this in relationships. We're attracted to the people that hurt us, people that say do dumb shit, or we see the red flags literally waving right in front of us. We're like, oh no, I'm lonely and I'm bitter and I'm whatever, so I'm just going to sign up for this shit. But we're really understanding, you know, having the commonality of language, the commonality of goals, the commonality of vision, and really being able to talk about this kind of stuff. This is what was, to me, really attractive about you and I dating, is that we had these conversations when we were dating. And these are big conversations, and a lot of people are scared of these conversations. They're scared to acknowledge where they really are. They're scared to acknowledge their fears, their demons, their darkness, their reservations, things that they're afraid of. And, you know, you end up linking up with somebody, and then 2, 3, 4, 5 months after the honeymoon phase is over, like, then all of a sudden this shit comes out and you're like, oh, see, you're the same as whatever, when my perspective is, why not put all of the freaking cards on the table out of the gates before we move any further? And so you and I had this conversation really early in dating about holding space. And what's funny, and I wish we could show this, maybe one day we will, you were looking through some of our old messages. And it's funny what the internet does, and when you look back at old messages of Instagram and stuff. And I remember you showing me a text of a conversation that you and I were having around this topic of holding space, where I was like, I just want to be able to be me and do what I want to do, and have a woman be able to do the same thing and have us support each other, right? Like, you don't need to have the same loves and passions as me, and I don't need to have the same as you, but I want to be able to know that I remember this vividly, like saying, if I come home from having a shitty day, that it doesn't make our entire world shitty. You don't fall off the tracks and go sideways. And that's something that has been incredibly important to me, and I'm getting somewhere with this, I promise. But understanding that this holding space in a relationship is literally allowing, and that word's really interesting, because it's not like I have to give you permission to be who you are. It's not what I'm saying, but allowing someone to be who the fuck they really are, and not judging them for that. Like, giving them space to be who the fuck they really are. Like, we are in this world where we have to be on, and we have to show up, and we have to have all these things. I have shitty days on the regular. I have days that I don't know why I'm sad. I'm just sad. I have days that I want to burn the whole fucking world down, and I don't know why. And what's fascinating about our relationship that I'd never had before in a relationship is, like, you allow me to just be me and have this experience without wrapping any judgment around it. And this is what I view as holding space, is you give me the ability to be mad, to be sad, to be upset, to be fired up, to be whatever, without taking any of that personally, for agreements, right? Or without attaching anything to that that's not what's already right in front of you. And what I really appreciate about our relationship is that I have seen that, I've seen that and done that with you too. I remember, and you can share this too, a really interesting day when we first started dating, when you were like, yo, I'm having a really shitty day. I don't know why, whatever. And I was like, cool. You remember this?
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
and I
of
just
course,
left you
yeah.
alone. I like let you do your thing. I wasn't like, well, what can I do? Can I save you? Can I get it and like what we try and go into hero mode as men. And I was just like, she was honest with me. She was transparent with me. She told me she was having a shitty day. She told me she'd hit me back in a little bit whenever she was ready. And I said, great. And I kept on with my day, and I held space for you to be able to have the experience that you needed to have, do what you needed to do. And when you came back, if you will, showed back up, that afternoon, I was in the same space.
Yeah.
And I think what's really, really, really important for people to understand about this conversation is, in order for you to really hold space well for somebody, you've got to be good.
Yeah.
You have to be good. You have to be able to stand on your own 2 feet. We were with a friend not too long ago who's dating this girl, and he was texting her, and she didn't text right back, and he like wrapped this story around it, and he's like, well, she normally always does this, and da-da-da. And I'm like, bro, this is a way bigger conversation than, what you think you're having right now. Is like, if you're not good, how are you going to show up for her? And this is something that I think is incredibly important for people to understand, is like, when you can hold space for yourself, step number 1, you can get your own self right. You can stand on your own 2 feet, not wrap attachments and judgments to every single thing happening around you. Become a creature of creating your reality versus being triggered by every fucking thing around you. You can really hold space for a lover. Yeah. You can really hold space for a significant other. And I know that was what the difference between our 1.0 and 2.0. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, like, we dated twice. We dated for 6 months, and she dumped me, and then I asked her back out. I gave her a second shot, okay? Well, and then we call that 1.0 and 2.0. Like, 1.0, we weren't there. 1.0, we hadn't experienced this yet. We hadn't gotten, where we needed to be, and really didn't understand how to articulate this in a relationship. 2.0, it was like, oh, shit. You went down the same rabbit hole I did, and we kind of figured out these same things. But allowing your significant other to be who the fuck they are, experience what they need to experience, their ups, their downs, their this, their that, is so unbelievably cool. I don't know how to describe it. It's so dope.
And to me, it is the most beautiful form of unconditional love.
Yeah.
I have a lot of polarity. I've dated where when things happen that may not even have had anything to do with our relationship, like, it may have been a kid thing, it may have been a work thing, who knows. And I just remember thinking, like, I just would really desire a partner that if things happen, like, I don't want to come in and make you feel better when I'm already not feeling good. Does that make sense? Like, I don't want to console you that you're having issues with me being in a
weird
negative
space,
right. Or weird space.
Not even negative, just a different state.
Yeah, and that truly used to break my heart. I was like, can't you we're good. Just sit there. Just stay for a second. I'm good. But I don't have the bandwidth to jump in and, like, now I have to console you on top of myself. And holding space in our relationship has truly modeled what unconditional love is. As I know now, because what holding space does is it builds trust. It builds connection. It builds safety in a relationship to where you can truly be who you are as a whole. Yep. The dark, the light, the good, the bad. You are, and you're perceived as less broken, right? If there's conflict that comes with when you're in conflict, it just becomes a nightmare, and it's very codependent.
Right.
And honestly, there's no drama. It sheds things. It makes things very
It actually makes it a lot fucking easier.
It makes things
Believe it or
easy.
not, it's incredibly difficult to do, but it makes shit so much easier.
Yeah.
Because, the foundation of this is set around Don Miguel Ruiz, around the 4 agreements. If you haven't read that book, get that book. And he talks about being impeccable with your word. And so, what this looks like for Saxony and I is, like, when I tell her, and I say this regularly, I'm pissed. I'm triggered. I'm all over the place. I'm this, and this, right? Am I lying? And being incredibly transparent with your words. Men, women, guys, gals, listen to me. Being incredibly truthful and transparent with your words. Ladies, if you're having a shitty day, like, don't butter that shit up. Don't lie to your man and say, I'm fine. You're fucking lying. Period. End of story. You are a liar. If you're not saying the words of where you really are, you're lying. Period. So don't be surprised that you have a disconnection with your lover. Fellas, same thing for you. Don't be surprised that you're disconnected with your lover because you're fucking lying, okay? Step number 1 is to be impeccable with your word. And Don Miguel Ruiz talks about not taking anything personal, right? In our nature, and I have had this in relationships, like if you're like, I'm pissed or I'm upset, my first thought is, what did I do? Is it me? Is it me? Wait, why are you mad? Why are you mad? We had this experience the other day where Saxony was just on her thing and she was in La La Land and didn't know why she was in La La Land, right? And we had I don't even want to call it a conflict, but we had this conversation that was pretty intense because you weren't totally transparent with me. We can talk about this. You weren't totally transparent with me. You told me, well, I'm just tired. But the truth is something was up. And that action caused disconnect between us. Now, we talked about it. We had a conversation around it for like 2 straight days. We were like, yo, there's something up. And come to find out, it was not speaking that real truth and worrying about, well, what will he say or what will she say? And again, this is not right or wrong, good or bad. This is what happened. We learned an incredibly valuable lesson. In fact, we were joking about it. This was on Saturday. We spent half of Saturday talking, and it was like one of the coolest conversations I've ever had in a relationship, period. Was us sitting in the front and having a cigar and having this beautiful conversation about what went on and how it felt in this whole, thing. And it was funny because we were like, shit, half of Saturday's gone, but we were like, dude, we got more accomplished in this one conversation than anything. But it was interesting for me because when you have that disconnect in your in truth, that is without question one of the most dangerous things that can happen in a relationship. And not just what you say, I have said it, I have done it, and I think everybody listening to this right now understands that sometimes you just say, I don't know, or it's no big deal, or it's this or that or the other, and it might be. However, what we identified and what you and I have become really fucking good at doing is knowing that there doesn't have to be something behind it. What I mean is I have weird days where I just feel like shit. I don't know why. Nothing happened. I didn't lose money. Nobody cut me off on the freeway. I never got a flat tire. My workout was great, but I'm just having an off fucking day. And when I say that to you, like what this looks like, guys, is literally me looking at Saxony and being like, yo, I'm having a fucked up day. I don't know why. I'm not attached to anything. I don't know what happened, whatever. And then you literally sitting there and holding that space, allowing me to have the experience that I need to have. Now there's tools in between, like you give me a cookie, it makes me happy, or this or that or the other, right? You continue to serve your lover, but really truly understanding that sometimes you might not know why you're going someplace. Sometimes you wake up, quote unquote, on the wrong side of the bed and just be having an off day. And what's more beautiful than anything I've experienced is literally being able to speak these exact words to you and then having you just hold that space.
Right.
No judgment, no anything, no assumptions, for agreements. And you knowing I'm going to work myself through what I need to work through. I'm going to be impeccable with my word. We're going to have a conversation around it if we need to. And that's truly like one of the most powerful things you can do for me and I can do for you is to hold that space, to stand in my spot, in my power, in my certainty, and say, my wife's going through some shit. I don't know what it is. She doesn't know what it is. It's totally fine. She'll figure it out.
That's what I was going to mention is part of holding space, like what you just referenced is, sometimes when I say, many people say like, I don't know. I'm tired. And that's the only thing that I can identify at the moment. And that may not make sense to you. That may not make sense to you. Like, well, that doesn't, then why is this? Why is this? Part of holding space is just being fully present emotionally and with empathy. It's like, okay, they're tired. There's a weird energy here. And instead of, a lot of people need to have the answer because they need to feel,
especially men.
It's making them uncomfortable instead of being like, okay, like my partner obviously doesn't know, or they're still exploring this whole where they're at. And that's another powerful thing is just taking a step back and being like, okay, like they don't know. Maybe they're tired. Maybe they're, it's PMS.
And they might not know. Right. That's what's crazy. May not know. And that's why holding space is literally like, shut up and just be present. Yeah.
Like, don't try to understand. Don't try to fix it. Just be there. It's being fully present without an opinion or without a plan.
Yeah. I think too, adding to that is when you're in a place of real honesty and transparency, like in your life with who you really are and what's really going on, and you're with a partner that's in that same world, it's a really beautiful thing.
Yeah.
But I think there's two types of people that are probably listening to this: people that don't have that have never experienced that because they've never done it, they've never talked about it with their lover, they've never been down that path, and the 4 agreements is not part of your reality. And then there's the people that are, and understanding that the more transparent you can be, the more honest you can be around this, like in both experiences. I remember vividly being in relationship where it was like I'd have a bad day, I'd say, yo, I'm having a shitty day, I need 15 minutes to just chill the fuck out. This has nothing to do with you, whatever. And within a matter of 30 seconds, like, well, what'd I do? Brrr, that finite energy, and it just it doesn't work. It's terribly destructive to a relationship for many different reasons. We don't need to go down the rabbit hole of why, but understanding that, like, when you're in a place where you're good with you can fill your own cup, right? I don't need you to fill my cup. You can do what you need to do and go where you need to go, and I can continue to be happy. I can continue to be full.
Right.
And we have found in having conversations with couples nonstop that this is part of the issue. Is holding space is incredibly difficult if you're scared. Holding space is incredibly difficult if you have attachment issues, abandonment issues, daddy issues, trust issues. If you have trust issues with your lover, good fucking luck working on holding space. So this is why truth is so fucking important. This is why opening up all of Pandora's box, putting all the cards on the table, being fully fucking naked, as we like to talk about, with your lover is really the very first step of being able to be in a place where you can truly hold space for somebody. Yeah. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
I think that people listening to this right now need to understand that, like, it's difficult to do, but at the same time it's not.
Yeah.
Hearing this, your thought process is, oh shit, I lied, or I haven't been telling this, or I haven't shared this, or I'm unhappy about this in my relationship, but I don't want to offend him or her, and all of these different things. And you hold on to all of this stuff and somehow expect to be connected, somehow expect to be loved and cherished and fully naked and all in, and yet we're playing like with 10%. And my question for people, rhetorical question, is with all of the fear that you have around being all in, with all of the fear that you have about putting all the cards on the table, with all the fear that you have or reservations that you have, what if it's literally the exact opposite? What if the result is the exact opposite of what you think? Guys being fully transparent with their women being fully transparent with their men, whether you're dating or even you've been married for 10 years. Like, the idea and the notion is they're going to run, they're going to leave, they're going to whatever. But what if it's the exact opposite? And the most radically fucking powerful thing that you could do to connect with one another is put all the cards on the table.
Yes.
They put all of the fucking cards on the table. I mean, that's literally like the common denominator is most people, if you think about it, they'd rather have some pain in knowing the truth than having pain in wondering. And we really think about that, like, I would rather know, even if it's going to hurt my feelings. And you and I have talked about this all the time. Like, you're very emotional, I'm emotional, and I might say some things or be in a space where it might hurt your feelings, but I'm going to share it with you regardless, because the truth is more important to me than your emotions. Yep. And I want that same thing. The truth is more important than my emotions. Right. And this is something I think a lot of people struggle with, and I strongly encourage you guys to not only hear this, but feel this and realize that maybe you're holding back. Maybe neither of you have been all in. You're kind of standing on the opposite sides of the room with your arms folded, like, that Burning Man image of the two parents kind of back to back, right? What if the common denominator, what if the single most important and powerful thing that you could do is, like, literally put all the cards on the table, build that commonality of truth and foundation of honesty, and then be able to start learning these things of holding space for one another.
And if you're in a marriage, if you're in a long-time relationship and this is not how your relationship is now, and this sounds enticing, start modeling this. You start being the one that does the holding of the space in conflict, in whatever it may be. And I will assure you that this creates it's almost like the other person's going to feel safer, and it's going to start blossoming their openness.
Right.
And I guarantee they're going to start showing up, modeling that same thing, because they're going to feel a lesser need to be defensive,
right,
or to be walled up, and it's like, if you just show up first, it's contagious,
right? Just
like toxicity can be contagious.
When you have to do it consistently as well.
Yes.
Something that is, an agreement that you and I made, and some of our non-negotiables is like, this is how it has to be. Like, you have to be able to get yourself right. And we have that agreement. Like, you've said that to me, like, you're responsible for your own shit. I'm responsible for myself. I'm responsible for my emotions. I'm responsible to come back to the table with a plan, with solutions, with tools, without it, being that victim expecting you to make me happy, you to save the situation.
And hold yourself to a higher standard. If you're dating and you're allowing drama, you're going into that cycle, check yourself. Say, when like, oh, well, she did this, and well, she usually texts back, and it's like, literally be so disciplined to call yourself out and break your own patterns. So then as you're moving further into the dating world, you start to recognize what you really don't want in your space, because you're modeling a better behavior for yourself, and that'll make dating a lot easier too.
100%. 100%. Anything, I mean, I want to give one example of this, because I really feel like breaking it down to the simplest common denominator is what's really powerful for people to understand it. Like, we share about coming home, walking in the door, and this is the easiest thing for people to really visualize and understand, because all of us have had this experience of the emotions behind it, right? Like, you've had your day, I've had my day. Emotionally, we might be completely on different planets. That's fine. That's not wrong, right?
Right.
But an understanding that, like, when you speak words to your lover, when you hear words from your lover, you have to be, number one, in a place of trust. You have to trust that what they're saying to you is real. And if you don't have that, that's step number one in this. But really understanding that, like, it's totally acceptable and totally normal and totally natural to be off.
Yeah.
And I think what's really important for people to understand is knowing that, women, if your man's out hunting all day long and he comes home, you don't know where he's been per se. You don't know. He doesn't need to check in with you every 3 fucking minutes to tell you where he's going and what he's eating and when he's shitting and all this other stuff. If he's out hunting and he's coming home and he's off, and you know that he's off, I mean, that's on him to get himself right. You understand what I'm saying? But allowing him that grace, I'm going to use your word, holding space for him to be able to do that. And fellas, getting your shit right. Like, being responsible enough for yourself to be able to get you right, whatever that means for you. Same thing with ladies. Your man walks in the door and the kids have shit all over the place. They've broken the windows, or this, that, and the other. Holding space for your woman to be able to have this experience, have these emotions, have this reality that she's going through. And then ladies, obviously being responsible enough and mature enough to get yourself right. I want people to really, like, understand this from the simplest thing, that it's absolutely okay to have these emotions, and for you to be in a place of holding space means you're allowing someone to have these emotions.
Well,
and it's, I mean, this is all relative, right?
Yeah.
If somebody's throwing fucking plates through the kitchen window, you have a completely different problem. But we are so emotional in creatures. I don't know if there's anybody else that's more emotional than you and I.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think that. I haven't met anybody.
We have topped the charts.
When God was like, yo, we're going to give you the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, like, we signed up for that shit, and we are extremely emotional.
Yeah.
And I say this because I'm literally living this with you right now, and living this experience of us having kids and businesses and offices and employees and people and things and emotions and exes and, baby daddies and all of these other things going on. We're as emotional as you've ever envisioned a couple to be. And this is something that I am incredibly passionate about, is helping people understand that it's completely normal to be there.
Right.
And it's so fucking powerful to be able to get yourself into a space where you accept people for who they really fucking are.
And treat your relationship like a sacred vessel.
Allowing that, yes.
Like, when someone, if when the love of my life steps into a space and I can feel he's struggling, the last thing I want to do is give him more struggle. Consider your like home, your figurative home is like you, and you come in. What I want to do is help you alchemize that and get rid of it, and not in a way that like I'm fixing you, but instead of showing up with more drama with your drama because I'm uncomfortable, if I show up and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna love him because that's what we do. We love hard. It helps filter out that so much faster when that's like a sacred responsibility for me in our relationship and how we run things. And I love that. Yeah. I absolutely love that.
Yeah. I love it. I'm like have 800 examples running around in my brain.
Right.
I don't want to like.
I really want to talk about the parenting
long,
thing, but we're talking about holding space, and I'm sure we've mentioned this a few times already. But it's another thing. There's a fine line between checking out, though, as I don't want people to be like, "Oh, holding space is like you go do your thing," because there is a level of physically being there, emotionally being there, but not going down, not going with them. It's
look, when you love somebody, right? When I'm a physical touch guy, right? And if you're having your moment. We'll just call it your moment. You're over here. You're doing your thing. You've told me this, whatever. I'm still a physical touch guy. Like this is part of what we're explaining is like not changing, right? I still am going to smack your ass whether you're here or here or here or here, right? That's who I am. I'm going to continue to love you the way that I want to love you, and the way that you expect me to show up, right? The 5 love languages, and vice versa. I think that's a huge point to understand. Is like when you're changing who you are, how you love, what you say, what you do based off of somebody else's emotions, that's not holding space. You have a big fucking problem. I mean, that's codependency. That's like a really, really, really toxic place to be. But like when you love me, you love me for the ups, for the downs, for the goods, the bads, for the light, for the dark, for the whole thing. And what I love about our relationship and what's really cool about holding the space is I'm not changing. Like, I'm not changing who I am when you are in your space. I'm not changing who I am when you say, hey, I'm having a shitty day. I'm not like, yeah, well, fuck you. And then I peace out. Like, I'm still loving you. I'm still connected to you. I'm giving you that space that you need to solve your problems or deal with whatever you need to. And I'm here when you need something. If you need my participation in this, yes. Dope, I'm in. But vice versa. I think that's what's really, really, really powerful about holding space is you're literally like creating this place for this person to have whatever experience they want to have without you running amok, without you going off the fucking deep end. You know what I'm saying?
Yep, absolutely.
That's a good point.
Yep. So this is a big one is holding space in parenting. We have encountered this numerous times with our children, especially when you have blended families. You'll have these big waves of emotions of things that kids are processing through. We actually have a friend, and she was talking about how her kids they're struggling, and there's one of them that's just like angry, right? Because there's a divorce happening, and there's all this stuff going on. And I told her, I said, let her give you all that. I said, because you're the safest thing that she has to be angry at. And of course, children aren't emotionally mature. They're children. So this is a totally different level of what holding space is. This is why we particularly wanted to break this down and talk about this is when a kid, particularly going through a divorce, right? They have anger. They don't know how necessarily, they might not have the tools to process this. When the bad parent, the neglectful parent, the other parent, whatever they're labeled as in this, they're probably going to be on their best behavior for that parent. The kids are, because there's a level of like abandonment happening. There's issues. So they're trying to present themselves as the best child ever. And then they go home to the parent that's doing the 9 to 5, that's feeding them all the time, that's doing the grind. That's the parent that's going to really get the backlash of the children's anger. And so being able to hold space, and many of you probably can recognize this in your kids. I was this kid. That's why I could speak about it, and really where it comes from is consider yourself just a safe space for your kid to be angry.
Right.
Because one way or another, they need to help work through this. And I've had this experience with my kids where they'll say something and it's all my fault. Like I'm the bad guy. It's all my fault. And what I've learned is every time that I show up and just let them spill it all, blame me for everything, be angry, it's like I created all the hell in the world for them. If I just sit and listen with empathy, with a true listening ear, I don't defend. I don't try to rationalize or make real because, especially like with teenagers. I had a psychologist friend, and she said, teenagers are so incredibly smart, but they lack wisdom. And so learning to just hold that space without defending and just truly with just compassion, being like, I hear you. I hear you. Thank you for communicating that with me. Thank you for telling me how you feel and responding to a child's harsh, heightened emotions with that type of just where they truly, it's almost like they're disarmed. Because if they're ready to fight and you just say, thank you for sharing. I'm glad you shared that with me. That was big. How do you feel now? Using these open-ended questions, you literally, I've seen this happen many times. It's all of a sudden they just diffuse down, and then 9 times out of 10, they're the next day they're the most loving kid in the house because all they wanted is to get out something that they don't know how to work with anymore. Right. And that is our responsibility as emotionally mature parents, is understanding it's not about us. Kids go through their shit just like adults do. But honestly, kids don't really get the same support that adults do. We can read books, we can talk to our friends, but kids are, they're in a funky place. And that's, to me, that's my responsibility as a mom and a stepmother and even an adopted aunt, like to hold that space for kids to be heard and seen.
Yeah, I want to be the place that my kids come to. And this is something that I have seen is like, I also want to be the disciplinary dad. I want to be the dad that helps lead them and guide them and show them the way. But at the same time, there's a really, really, really interesting balance in being someone that your kids want to come to, that your kids like feel safe enough to have these emotional experiences with, whether they're heightened, whether they're, we could label them good or bad, but like when my kid freaks out, I want my kid to know that I'm a safe place for them to freak out. When my kid's sad, when my kid's mad, when my kid's upset. And as a father, if I'm trying to create this neutral being of, never having these experiences, then when they do have them, I'm going to be the last fucking place that they want to come to. There's a cool picture that I shared on Instagram a while back of me and my son, Will, and they had lost their semifinal game to make it into the championship, their football game. And he was on, I'm holding him, he's on my shoulder and he's bawling. And I wasn't telling him to man up and nut the fuck up and let's go and put your big boy pants on. I'm like, no, dude, feel this. I remember telling him that. I'm like, feel this. Feel the sting of this defeat. Like, be sad, be mad, be everything right now. And I loved it because he's with all his kids and he's with everybody. And when he got to me, he just broke down. He just lost it, and I honored that space because I realized, like, he knew that he was safe enough to not be like, oh, Dad, I just got to man up and go do it. But, like, he knew that he could, like, unload this emotion with me. Yeah. And I held that space for him to do that. And I feel like over the years, as I've understood this and learned this myself, like, I want to be able to have a wife who I can have these experiences with, and I have that. I want to have friends that I can be real as fuck with and have my own experiences, and they hold that space for me. It's the exact same fucking thing with my kids. I want to be that person that when my child has these experiences, I'm there. And they can feel safe being who they are, being what they feel, being what's inside of them without having that, that feeling of judgment or anything like that. Now, when my kid's a total fucking asshole, I'm gonna put him in line.
Oh yeah,
complete different reality,
we definitely
right?
Discipline our kids,
but
it's different.
Showing my children that it's okay to feel, that it's okay to have these things, and to truly hold space for them to experience these things, I think is something that I never had growing up. And we talk about breaking the mold and breaking the chains of family and breaking tradition and breaking the cycle. If I can be this way now in my life, not only do I now have that in a relationship with you and we're building that and literally showing our kids this example, but if I can be that way as a father and allow my children to see this experience and to have this experience, what does that look like if I'm able to share this with them and do this with them at a young age, this will become their norm. They will understand that it's okay to have these emotions, it's okay to have these feelings. And when my daughter is growing up, you talked earlier about dating people and not even speaking the same language. My daughter is speaking this language now.
Yeah.
What is this going to look like as she starts dating seriously and having these conversations with young men? What's it going to look like when my son is having these conversations, was 14, 13 years old at the time, now 15? What's it going to look like as he matures and grows and has experienced this space conversation? Those needy little girls, the yappy, he's like, yo, that's not going to be my
Right.
jam, right? And same thing with my daughter. And so I strongly encourage people to understand, like, you are number one. It's got to start with you,
Yeah.
right? It's got to start with you listening to this right now. And then if you're in an intimate relationship, it's got to be something with you and your lover. It has to be like become the norm of reality.
It's just the gold standard of our relationship.
Well, for us, yeah.
Period.
And I think really if people are truly honest with themselves, this is the gold standard of relationships, period. Is it the pinnacle? No, there is no pinnacle. We're constantly evolving and growing and evolving and growing. There is no pinnacle to this reality, but like being able to have the level of respect and the level of connection and the level of truth and honesty to be able to hold space for somebody. It speaks volumes to who you are as a human being and the work that you've done to control your emotions, to understand your emotions, to harness your own emotions, but then be able to do that with somebody else. Now imagine the trickle-down effect, ladies and gentlemen, as you're listening to this, to be able to pass this to our children. Imagine the trickle-down effect where you can be the person that holds space for your children. Your son, your daughter, they're going through whatever they're going through. The emotions that these kids are going through nowadays, the shit that they're seeing and experiencing and facing that we didn't. I mean, it's amplified, it's magnified, right? And we can say, well, when I was a kid, I don't give a fuck about any of that. Like, I want to teach my kids what it is that's helping me win in life.
Yeah.
What's helping me, find and create and build an amazing relationship and a business and a body and all these other things. And the idea and notion that I can transfer this, if you will, just by leading and showing my children this example of holding space for them, in my opinion, this is you're literally transferring this gold standard to your posterity. So as they grow up, we talked earlier about having this commonality of language. This will become the language they look for. This will become the language that they find. This will be the language that they like literally inject in their own lives, in their own relationships. So they're not doing this at 40 years old or 35 years old,
Right.
two, 3, 4 divorces later. They're fucking starting out with this gold standard because we're living it.
Yep. Yeah. I cringe when I hear children are resistant, or they're resilient. They're resilient, not resistant.
Well, they're both.
This is true. But, and I feel like that's such a cop-out, too, that we're not showing up. And,
Right.
We're letting society raise our kids. We're letting their friends raise them. I mean, it's really our responsibility to model healthy, mature ways of processing the world and relationships. So step up.
I hear people talk about we're staying together for the kids, and it's like, it's just mind-bending to me to think that somehow you and your partner staying together in an unbelievably miserable state where you don't even talk to each other, you don't like each other, you don't touch each other. How the fuck is that raising healthy kids?
Oh, that's
it's probably
so backwards.
it's more detrimental than actually cutting the ties and going out and starting something new and being actually
And being
really
honest.
happy.
Being honest with your
We
children.
don't need to go down that rabbit hole of divorce and the whole thing, but I think that it's a very real conversation in the sense that, there isn't a person listening to this that doesn't want better for their children than what they had. Right. You might have had the greatest upbringing and mom and dad love each other and they were kissing each other and it was all fucking fine and dandy. But like, I know that you want even better for your children. I know that you want even better for yourself. And so this reality of being able to build, these tools and these experiences, I've said this 1,000 times. Like, I don't remember a whole lot of the things that my dad told me. I remember what he showed me. And I remember how he was with my mom. I remember how he was with me. I remember the affection or lack thereof of affection that was shown to me as a kid. And if you think somehow your kids are going to be any different, you're fucking out to lunch.
Yeah.
Your kids, we're the same way. We will see soon enough. I'm already seeing this in my children. You are too. Mm-hmm. A lot of the patterns, a lot of the same habitual things that like we have experienced in our lives. Yeah. To somehow radically think that there's just going to be this magic wand and our kid's going to learn all of these things or have all these things while we haven't been the exemplar of these things for the last 20 years, you're wrong. You're just fucking wrong. And so you starting with yourself and building these things and building this foundation and getting yourself good in being able to hold space for other human beings and then being able to transfer that to your children and truly allowing your children to see it, experience it, feel it, touch it. I can't predict the future, but I would be willing to bet that my children will have, a much different experience dating and looking for love and building with somebody than a mom and dad that didn't talk to them, talk to each other for 10 years because they hated each other and they were just waiting for the kids to turn 18 so they could, move out of the house and then finally move along with their life. Assumptive statement, yes, but whatever. Don Miguel Ruiz will forgive me for making this assumption because I'm fucking right. Babe, anything else you want to share on this? Do you think we covered it all? Do you think we got the nuts and the bolts for people to really understand it?
I would highly encourage you guys to write a comment, inquire further if there's more you want to know about this topic, because it is a big topic, but it's also something very, very simple.
Mm-hmm. What would you say to people right now, like the number one thing that they should start doing immediately to become a practitioner of holding space?
Ground yourself. Get very, very clear in your heart, clear in your mind. That way when things come up, you already know where you stand and you're not blown around with the wind.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Yeah. Tossed to and fro with every wind of doctrine. Imagine being tossed to and fro with every emotional reaction, every emotional connection.
Like a nightmare.
Yeah, it's crazy. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate you guys. If you got some value from this, please leave us a comment. Please like it. Please share. Please tag anybody that you know that needs to hear this, whether you're watching this on Instagram or Facebook or YouTube or whatever. Share this with people that you know that could benefit from it, and we genuinely appreciate it.
Indeed.
Until next time, love you. See you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.